Dererick's laugh cracked against the old wooden walls like a rusty nail being hammered. Linda clapped sharp, eager, like she was sealing a deal. I didn't blink. I didn't move. The judge looked up, quiet as snowfall. How many properties do you own, Mr. Collins? The room changed. Chairs stopped creaking. Someone cleared a throat and swallowed it. The ceiling fan spun slow, tired, stirring the smell of varnish and old paper. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. I'd been counting my whole life. That part was easy. Dererick spoke again, louder this time, as if volume could make it true. The house is mine. He stood in a gray suit that looked expensive until you touched it. Hair slicked with too much gel, phone half out of his pocket as if it might applaud him. 31, already convinced the world owed him interest. Linda smiled at him, my Linda, or what used to be. Her hands came together politely. Practiced. The sound landed in my chest harder than any gavel. I stayed still. If someone had told me 10 minutes earlier that silence could weigh this much, I wouldn't have believed it. Silence is my uniform. Wear it long enough, and people mistake it for weakness. They don't notice the math running underneath. The judge's pen hovered over his yellow pad. He didn't look at Dererick. He didn't look at Linda. He looked at me. One of the 9 properties, he murmured. I see. I'd like to take a look at it. Linda's head snapped toward me. Dererick's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind his eyes. Confusion, maybe, or the first misstep in a dance he thought he'd mastered. My name is Raymond Collins, I said. Most people call me Ray. I'm 56, born and raised in Peoria. I spent 30 years estimating construction costs, warehouses, strip malls, storage units, places nobody photographs. I learned early the men who talk the least usually carry the longest tape measures. That courtroom sat 2 blocks off the downtown square, across from the coffee shop where I used to grab a burnt cup at dawn. The wood paneling was older than Dererick. Judges come and goed. They learn to listen for what isn't said. I stood in my worn boots and faded Carhartt jacket. Linda used to tease me about that jacket. You look like you're going to work even when you're not. I guess I was. The clerk called a brief recess. The judge stood and slipped out the side door. The fan kept humming. Someone in the back whispered my name like a rumor. Dererick leaned toward Linda. See, he murmured. Told you. He's got nothing. Nothing is funny. People say it when they don't know how to count. In the hallway, lemon cleaner and drying coats filled the air. I rested my palm against the cinder block wall, feeling the cold seep through. Elaine Foster stepped up beside me. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. Elaine has a way of standing that says she's already read the room. Dark blazer, practical shoes, hair cut clean. Southside girl, law school through grit, never wasting a word. Mr. Collins, she said quietly, they filed an affidavit this morning. I nodded. Figures. They claimed the marital home was your only asset. I exhaled through my nose. 1 lie. 2 witnesses. 3 signatures. 3 signatures. Elaine met my eyes. Their math doesn't hold. Almost smiled. Almost back in the courtroom. Dererick paced like he owned the floor. Linda smoothed her skirt, jaw set. I thought about the years I let pass without speaking. Holidays where I swallowed jokes. Dinners where I paid and stayed quiet. I told myself it was peace. I told myself it was love. It was habit. When the judge returned, the room rose and settled. He glanced at the filings, then looked at me. Mr. Collins, he said, before we proceed, is the Peoria residence the only property you own? All eyes on me. Dererick willed me to nod. Linda's fingers dug into her purse strap. The fan hummed. Somewhere outside, a truck backfired. I didn't answer. I counted. Years, papers, signatures, mistakes, regrets. Then Elaine stepped forward. I'd stayed silent long enough to let them believe their own numbers. Now it was time to count out loud. My father ran a small HVAC outfit on Peoria's west side. 1 truck, 1 ladder, toolbox, smelling of oil in winter. Count twice, he said. Say it once, if at all. By 25, I was estimating for a regional contractor. Concrete, steel frames, zoning headaches, blueprints into numbers, numbers into sleep. Warehouses don't clap, they just stand. That suited me. Mary, my first wife, understood quiet. We met at a church fish fry, married young, built a life smelling of sawdust and coffee. Cancer took her before we learned how to grow old. Silence can be kind or cruel, depending on how long you let it sit. Linda came later. She laughed easily, liked dinners out, warm lamps, the idea of starting fresh. We married at the courthouse, the same building where Dererick would later crow about my house. Simplicity felt like a blessing then. When it came to money, I kept things separate, not to hide, but to keep the peace. Linda had opinions about spending. I had habits about saving. We agreed to disagree. I invested slowly, legally, quietly. A laundromat in Galesburg. Storage units near I-74. A small warehouse leased to a grain co-op, each in its own LLC, set up before marriage, all advised by a credit union officer who liked things tidy. I never hid the work. I just didn't announce it. Dererick noticed. He was 20 when Linda and I married. Smart mouth, quick grin, always sizing rooms. At Thanksgiving, he'd lean back, ask, "Still driving that rust bucket?" I'd smile, pass the gravy. At Christmas, he'd unwrap a gift I bought solid, useful and say, "They make nicer versions now, right?" I'd nod, count my blessings. Patience teaches people the wrong math. Linda didn't push back. She liked Dererick's confidence, his big dreams, his fast spending. When she asked about vacations, I said, "Maybe next year." When she asked why I didn't use a premium card, I said, I didn't need the miles. At night, I lay counting. Bills paid, properties steady, marriage uneven. Then came the lawsuit. Reading their filing felt like discovering someone had been using your name to open accounts you never authorized. Their language was clean, confident, wrong. They claimed the Peoria house was marital property alone. They acted like there was nothing else to consider. Elaine didn't sugarcoat it. We sat in her office, blinds half open, traffic humming below. "You let them believe you were broke," she said. "People take that personally when they find out it's not true." "I didn't lie," I said. She nodded. "You didn't correct them either." That hit. I thought about all the times I'd chosen quiet because it was easier. How keeping the peace had trained them to underestimate me. I wasn't angry yet. Disappointed, sure. In them, yes. But also, in myself. I didn't want money to be the thing. Elaine folded her hands. "Money isn't the thing," she said. On the drive home, the prairie wind shoved the truck around. I passed the turnoff for the storage units. Not ready yet. I needed to count something else first. Mistakes. I'd mistaken patience for protection, silence for strength. I'd counted on gratitude, where entitlement had been accruing interest. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd finally learned how to measure it. Inside, Linda was on the phone. She lowered her voice when she saw me. "We'll talk later," she said, eyes sliding away. I stood there, keys in hand, listening to the quiet, counting what I'd built and what I'd ignored. For the first time, I wondered if playing broke had been the most expensive habit of all. VFW Post 118 sits off. A side road smelling like fried fish on Fridays and old stories the rest of the week. I've been stopping there since my estimating days. Back when a cheap beer and a bad jukebox could sand the edges off a long bid cycle. You don't go there to be impressed. You go there to remember what matters. That night, I didn't plan to stay. I just needed air somewhere that wasn't the house. Prairie wind shoved at the door when I went in, then died behind me. Warmth took over. Neon hummed. A couple of vets argued quietly about a Cubs lineup from 10 years ago. I ordered a light beer and took the stool near the wall. The jukebox crackled to life. Merle. Beyond, I counted scratches on the bar top while the foam settled. Then I heard Dererick's laugh. From the back booth, loud enough to cut through the music, the kind of laugh that expects company. I didn't turn. Didn't need to. Linda's voice followed. Brighter than usual, pitched up like she was trying to sound younger than she felt. I angled my shoulder and listened. Dererick lifted his glass. "Two new beginnings," he said, "in old houses that finally change hands." Linda clinked his glass. Ice chimed like loose change. "You earned it," she said. My beer tasted flat. Dererick kept going. "Guy spent his whole life counting bolts and bricks," he said. "Didn't even know what he was sitting on. 9 properties, please. If he had anything, we'd have seen it." Someone else laughed. Not loud enough. My hand tightened around the bottle. The glass bit into my palm. Knuckles went white. Linda said my name then. Not defending, just labeling. Ray never wanted more. Simple guy. He liked it that way. That was the cut. Not the money. Not even the house. 30 years of work reduced to a punchline over cheap gin. In that room, where men toasted service and loss, my silence was being cashed like a bad check. I counted to 5. Then 10. I could stand, walk back, lay it all out. The laundromat that survived recessions. The storage units that never missed rent. The warehouse that smelled like grain and stability. I could watch Dererick's face fold, but I didn't. Once you speak, you can't choose who hears. I needed the right room. I finished my beer slow, Paid in cash. As I stood, Dererick said one last thing, louder than the rest. Tomorrow, we're free men. I stepped into the wind and let it hit my face. Cold cleared the noise. I drove home with the radio off, headlights carving a narrow truth through the dark. Sleep didn't come easy. It circled, kept its distance. I stared at the ceiling and counted cracks I'd never fixed. I thought about Mary. About promises that don't expire just because you stop saying them out loud. Next morning, I sat across from Elaine again. Same office, same blinds, different man. They celebrated, I told her. She didn't ask where, didn't need to. What do you want to do? She asked. I looked at my hands. Steady. I want them to stop laughing, I said. Legally. Elaine nodded. Then we count carefully, she said, and accept the risk. Dererick had signed an affidavit swearing I owned nothing beyond the Peoria house. That statement wasn't just wrong, it was sworn. If we proved otherwise, it wasn't a misunderstanding, it was misrepresentation. Maybe worse, she added. Once we open the books, everything's visible. Old filings, old signatures. If there's a gap, they'll try to pry it open. I thought about a missing form from years back, a transfer filed during a snowstorm when the clerk closed early. I'd meant to follow up. I'd counted on memory. Dignity says walk away, Elaine said. Justice says, speak. I counted a slow breath. Let it go. I'm done being counted out, I said. Elaine smiled just a little. Then let's do the math. Paper smells different when it's been asleep too long. Dust and ink and the faint bite of metal. Clips holding their ground for decades. I hadn't opened the basement safe in years. Not really. I spun the dial by muscle memory, like taking an old route home, and listened for the click that meant the past was about to speak. Elaine wanted everything. Originals, not summaries. We don't impress judges with confidence, she'd said. We impress them with paper. I spread folders across the dining table, like a contractor laying out plans. LLC formation docs. Deeds, lease agreements, old tax returns, still typed in a different decade. I counted each stack. 1, 2, 3. Careful, usually pays until it doesn't. The gap stared back from a yellow checklist Elaine gave me. Transfer confirmation. 1,998. The warehouse, interest, the one I rolled into an LLC during a February storm that closed the courthouse at noon. I remembered the slush on my boots, the clerk's tired smile, telling myself I'd come back with the stamped copy. I never did. I drove that afternoon with the radio low, windshield wipers beating time. First stop, the credit union on Knoxville Avenue. Same brick building, same smell of carpet cleaner and coffee. Carol still worked the counter. Gray hair now, glasses on a chain. She remembered my father. She remembered me. Counting again? Trying to? I said. She pulled archive records, slow but thorough. Most of what I needed was there, not the missing piece. Next, the warehouse. The lot sat quiet under a pale sky. Wind worrying the loose metal on the loading bay. I stood there and listened to it rattle like an old man clearing his throat. That warehouse had kept food moving when everything else stopped. I'd skipped my niece's graduation to close that deal. I counted the cost then. I counted it now, at the county records office. A young clerk tapped at a keyboard and shook his head. Digital only goes back so far, he said. Older stuff's off-site. How far? He shrugged. Depends who boxed it. That night, I ate a sandwich over the sink and thought about all the times I'd chosen later. Later is a lie that charges interest, Elaine called. Any luck? Not yet. A pause. We'll keep digging, she said. But if they sense weakness, they'll lean on it. I know, I said. Dererick leans on anything that bends. 2 days later, I drove an hour out to a storage facility, the kind with long aisles and fluorescent lights that hum like they're tired of working. Bill, a retired county worker, met me there, slow-moving but memory-sharp. Snowstorm year, he said, squinting. Yeah, we boxed a bunch and sent it out. He disappeared between rows and returned with a cardboard boxes labeled in thick marker. I counted breaths while he searched. 1, 2, 3. He pulled a folder and set it down. This one, my name in faded ink. The stamp clean, the date right. Relief is quiet when you've lived long enough. It doesn't shout. It sits. Back at Elaine's office. We built the order. Clear, not flashy. The laundromat spoke for itself. Steady income, no drama. The storage units did the same. The warehouse closed the loop. We didn't list all 9 in detail. Didn't have to? The count was wrong. Doubt crept in at night. What if winning meant losing the last illusion I had? What if silence had been my shield, and speaking left me bare? Elaine saw it. This isn't about money, she said. It's about being named correctly. The morning of the hearing, I put on the same jacket, counted the buttons, left the house keys on the counter. Some things you don't take back. In the hallway, Linda walked past. Didn't stop. Didn't have to. I'd already stopped pretending. When the bailiff called us in, I felt calm. Ready. I had done the work. I had the paper. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be guessing. The courtroom sounded different the second time. Same walls. Same fan. But the air had weight now, like a storm deciding whether to break. Dererick stood straighter. Chin up. Suit pressed. Linda sat close, hands folded, lips tight. They didn't look at me not once. I didn't take it personally. People avoid mirrors when they aren't ready for what they see. The judge entered, flipped through the file. Paper whispered. A cough echoed. I counted the seconds between breaths. My pulse slowed to match. Mr. Collins, the judge said, will continue. Dererick's attorney spoke first, confident, clean, repeated the claim. Peoria House. The marriage. Nothing else worth mentioning. Facts never checked, presented as gospel. When he finished, the judge turned to Elaine. Ms. Foster. She stood, didn't rush, didn't smile. Your Honor, she said, we'll begin with Exhibit A. She handed a folder. It slid across the desk with a soft scrape that carried farther than expected. The defendant owns a laundromat in Galesburg, she said, formed under Collins Wash LLC in 2009. Premarital, profitable, documented. A ripple moved through the room. Dererick shifted. Exhibit B. Storage units off I-74. Collins Storage. Holding steed and lease agreements included. Linda's hands tightened. Knuckles went pale. She leaned forward, maybe to interrupt, then didn't. Exhibit C. Elaine paused. A warehouse interest leased to a regional grain co. Transfer confirmed in 1998. Let the date sit. Dererick's smile cracked just a corner. Elaine didn't list everything, didn't need to. She set the stack down, looked at the judge. Your Honor, the sworn affidavit submitted by Mr. Dererick Collins states the Peoria residence is Mr. Raymond Collins's sole asset. The judge looked up. Is that so? Elaine nodded. It is sworn, and it is incorrect. The room leaned in. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered Dererick's name like a warning. The judge turned to Dererick. You signed this? Dererick swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Did you read it? Yes. And at the time you signed, the judge said evenly, you were aware of these other properties. Dererick opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his attorney. Linda stared straight ahead, as if the wall might offer shelter. Dererick, he began. The judge raised a hand. Careful, this is where counting matters. Silence fell. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that tells the truth it's about to speak. Elaine finished. We're not here to embarrass anyone. We're here because sworn statements have weight, and misrepresenting assets to the court carries consequences. The judge nodded, then looked at me. Double quotes, Mr. Collins, he said. Why didn't you disclose these earlier? I stood, wood floor solid under my boots. Because I wasn't asked, I said, and because I trusted my family. The last word didn't wobble. It surprised me. The judge studied me, then looked back at Dererick. Next time, he said, dry as dust. Learn to count before you swear. Gavel down. Not hard enough. Motion denied, he said. Claims dismissed. Over. Outside. Winter sun cut through the clouds like it had someplace better to be. Linda caught up on the steps, breath short. Ray. I turned. I'm done being easy math, I said. She stopped. I walked on. The first morning in the new condo was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. No slammed cabinets. No hidden tensions. The low hum of the fridge and the river sliding by like it had nowhere else to be. I stood on the balcony with a chipped mug of black coffee and counted something different. Not assets, not losses, but breaths. The Illinois River moved gray and steady. I'd driven over that bridge 1,000 times without stopping. Funny how victory slows you down more than defeat ever did. I didn't move here because I had to. I moved because I chose to. The Peoria house was still mine legally clean, but it no longer felt like home. Some places hold memories hostage. Letting go isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the last smart investment you make. A week later, I donated one of the smaller properties, the warehouse lease interest, to a local housing program run by a church on the South End. No press, no plaque, just a handshake from a man who said, "This will help people sleep warmer." That was enough. Linda called 3 times before I answered. On the 4th, I picked up. Her voice sounded smaller, like the room around her had emptied. "Ray," she said, and stopped. Silence stretched. I didn't know, she said finally, about the properties, about any of it. I leaned against the balcony rail, watching a barge crawl upstream. You knew enough, I said. You knew who you were clapping for. She breathed in sharp. I never meant. I know, I said. People rarely mean the damage they cause. That doesn't make it imaginary. There was a time I would have filled the quiet for her, smoothed it over, counted her comfort before my own. Not anymore. Linda, you didn't want a partner. You wanted something you could count on while you counted me out. She didn't argue. That said more than any apology could. We hung up without drama. No promises, no anger, just an ending that finally fit. Life settled. I kept the laundromat, still hums like clockwork. Storage units still open and close on time. The rest do what they were always meant to do. Stand quietly and work. Sometimes people ask why I never told my family what I had. I tell them, I spent my life counting materials so buildings wouldn't fall. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to count respect. When you don't, other people do it for you and they usually get it wrong. Revenge wasn't standing in that courtroom, watching Dererick shrink into his chair. That was just arithmetic. Necessary. Final. The real revenge was this calm. This space, this choice to live, counted, not guessed. If you've ever been underestimated because you stayed quiet, if someone laughed while you held your tongue, remember this. Silence can be strength, but only if you're ready to speak when it matters.